Dear friends, Namaste and welcome back to my show. 27th May is the death anniversary of Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru. So it is time for remembrance and we will recall 5 big gifts that he made to the nation. The best way to describe Nehru in his own words is to quote from his biographer Stanley Walport's book, where Walport mentions and quotes Nehru as saying that I am the last Englishman to rule India. The words to note are Englishman and rule. A democrat governs on behalf of the people, whereas the word rule is used to signify a tyrant. Nehru's mentor and guru, Mr. Mohandas Gandhi, also writes in Swaraj, and I quote, "Indeed, Jawaharlal is more English than Indian in his thought and makeup." So that gives us a background, a kind of a historical background to this video. Nehru was portrayed, or as we would say today, marketed as a chacha or an uncle, and his birthday was celebrated as Children's Day. And on birthdays, people give away return gifts. But Chacha Nehru used to give away gifts at different times throughout the year, throughout his reign. In this video, we shall consider the 5 big gifts that he gave to the world. The first gift came in August 1947. This was the partition of India. The partition of India was not just drawing new boundaries on a map. It uprooted 15 million or 1.5 crore people from their homes, and it resulted in the death of 2 million or 20 lakh people. Gift number 2 was the gifting or giving away of a large chunk of territory in Kashmir to Pakistan. What you are seeing on the screen is the total area of Jammu and Kashmir that had seceded to India. This is shown by the red outline. What is shaded in green is what remains of Kashmir within India. What is shown in the shade blue is the Union Territory of Ladakh. And just below Kashmir, the area shown in dark yellow is Jammu. As you can see from this diagram, POK measures 1,22,351 square kilometers, and the area of Kashmir which is left with India is only 16,351 square kilometers. What is of interest to note is that just when the Indian army was succeeding in driving out the Pakistani invaders, Nehru ordered a ceasefire, and this territory remains with Pakistan. It is also said that Mr. Sheikh Abdullah was not very keen about Gilgit and Pakistan coming back to India at all, because that is a tribal area over which he has no control. His base was just the little bit of Kashmir, which is 16,350 square kilometers of area. The Pakistan occupied Kashmir, whose capital is Muzaffarabad and Mirpur area, is also populated by Punjabis. So Mr. Abdullah also did not have any interest in that area. And that is how this boundary stands today. But don't forget that gift number 2 came as a 3-in-1 gift pack. Besides POK being gifted away to our neighbor, we also got in return Article 370 and Article 35A. These two articles of the Indian Constitution, that is 370 and 35A, have now been scrapped. So what remains to be done is recovering the lost territory. And now we come to gift number 3, which was really tinkering and meddling with the Constitution of India. A cartoon of those times shows Nehru whipping Dr. Ambedkar, who is trying to tame the animal called the Constitution. Let us examine what prompted the cartoonist Shankar to draw this cartoon. The Americans are very proud of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. The First Amendment of the US Constitution was enacted to protect freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to assemble, the right to practice a religion, and the right to petition a government for redressal of grievances. But Chacha Nehru brought in the First Amendment to do just the opposite. He curtailed the rights to free speech and curtailed the rights of the freedom of the press. This happened on 10th May 1951, and this amendment was passed by the Provisional Parliament, not by a parliament elected through a general election. It was a parliament which was sitting in place by virtue of a limited franchise. As we saw, the first proper general election in India was held only in 1952, whereas the First Amendment took place in 1951 in the month of May. It is for this reason that the Supreme Court of India has agreed to examine a public interest litigation, or a PIL, challenging the changes made to the right to freedom of speech and expression by the First Amendment Act of 1951. So that was the third gift to the nation, but it had many sad consequences to many other people. Many of us may question, so what? But it's not as simple as that. Friends, the famous film songwriter and lyricist Majrooh Sultanpuri was the first victim of the First Amendment to the Indian Constitution. Some of you may be familiar with Majrooh Sultanpuri's compositions. He gave us the famous lyric Koi Humdam Na Raha, or the famous lines Karwa Banta Gaya, or Rehte The Kabhi Jinke Dil Mein. Well friends, Majrooh Sultanpuri in a poem called him a tyrant or a dictator like Hitler. And in turn, Nehru locked him up in Arthur Road Jail in Bombay for 2 long years. For those of you who are poetically inclined, you can stop this video, pause it, and you can read his composition at length. I've just highlighted the important part where he says, "Ye bhi koi Hitler ka hai chela," and Commonwealth ka das hai Nehru. He calls him a slave of the Commonwealth, and he compares him to be a disciple of Hitler. Not exactly Hitler himself, but a disciple of Hitler. Well friends, that is the price you pay and end up in jail for 2 years under the gift of Mr. Nehru. Well friends, he did not stop there. Nehru banned so many other books which are too numerous to include in a single video. But what you see on your screens are 9 Hours to Rama by Stanley Walpert, the Ramayana by Aubrey Menon, Chandramohini by Ansar Nasiri, and also Campbell's The Heart of India, Arthur Koestler's The Lotus and the Robot, Bertrand Russell, a famous philosopher, his Unarmed Victory was also banned, as was The Dark Urge by Taylor. Even a Gujarati book by Bhupat Singh was banned. This is just a short list and does not include films and many other journals and newspapers, including The Observer. Compare this with the utterances of his great-grandson and the mother of the great-grandson, who were shouting from rooftops the kind of slogans that you see on the screen. And now friends, it's time to open gift number 4. So friends, did you know that the man who was offended at being compared to a disciple of Hitler would have himself acted in a tyrannical way and dismissed so many duly elected governments, the first being the elected government of Kerala. Following his footsteps, Congress party dismissed 43 state governments between 1953 and 2009. Wow, that surely is a great gift to a democratic country by Uncle Nehru. And finally, here is gift number 5 for you. This gift was in the form of giving away an offer to occupy a permanent seat on the Security Council of United Nations, and instead promoting and supporting China for the same role. The newspaper The Hindu ran a story on 27th of September 2005 reproducing an old clipping defending Uncle Ji by quoting his reply to Dr. J. N. Parikh in the Lok Sabha in 1955. Little did Chacha Ji know that in the years to come, his private and official exchange of letters with his sister Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit who served as the 8th President of the United Nations General Assembly from 1953 to 1954, would become available to the public. It is now available to researchers at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. And that correspondence and record of documents confirms the US backing which India had for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council back in early 1950s, and which was later supported by the Russians, or the USSR as it was then known, in 1955. Thus, his lie is exposed nearly 70 years later. But of course, it is too late to bring in any kind of a proceeding against him for lying in the parliament. So friends, that brings me to the end of today's show. Very briefly, we recalled Chacha Nehru's 5 great gifts to the nation. Of course, he gave many more, and we could make this video stretch for hours. But for now, he gave 2 million people, 20 lakh people, a brutal death. He gifted more than 1,22,000 square kilometers of territory to our dear and poor neighbor. He made the First Amendment and threw a poet in jail for 2 years. Besides, he banned many more books. He started a season of dismissing elected state governments, and also in his wisdom rejected the permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. That brings me to the end of the video. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you again soon. Until then, bye-bye.